Hi there, I'm Rory Buckley, a PhD candidate at University College Dublin, Ireland, and today I'm at the Adaptive Learning Agents workshop to present a paper titled How to Pick Strawberries Safely, Objective Reward Shaping with Visual Complexity. Reinforcement learning is a form of machine learning that is centered around agents taking actions in an environment and learning the best actions to take based on reward. As the title suggests, these rewards and how they can be artificially shaped is the focus of this paper. Reinforcement learning currently is slow and costly due to poor sample efficiency. It requires many interactions with its environment to learn. Adding to this, costs increase when the reward is not frequent. Infrequent or sparse rewards are concerned in more complex realistic scenarios. Testbeds are moving towards more complex and realistic scenarios such as RTS games like StarCraft 2, which was recently beaten by AlphaStar, or Dota 2, recently beaten by OpenAI 5. Rewards can be so sparse in complex scenarios like RTS games that only the signal at the end of a long episode of learning provides reward. A signal representing victory or defeat, or survival, may be all that is available. This paper proposes and outlines an approach for dealing with sparsity of rewards in increasingly complex and realistic testbeds. It proposes a return to reward shaping, but it seeks to avoid a return to rewards designed by human hands alone. Handcrafted rewards, which we refer to as subjective reward shaping, are designed to be avoided. Subjective reward shaping has a history of learning suboptimal behavioral policies for agents due to biasing them towards local optima. These behaviors frequently appear to be merely absurd, but potentially they may be dangerous in the real-world AI or AGI and artificial general intelligence. A less subjective reward shaping is sought, referred to as objective reward shaping in the paper. Particularly of interest is an objective form of reward shaping that could avoid the potential future dangers of AGI. As Elon Musk famously warned, we must avoid a strawberry picker scenario, where shallow forms of reward lead to an agent that is solely concerned with maximizing a subjective and self-centered reward function. It aims only to maximize strawberry production, incidentally leading to the destruction of all the rest of the economy and ecology around it, including human cities, to make more farmland for strawberry production. As the title suggests, an objective reward shaping should avoid not just theoretical local optima and the behavioral policy for existing benchmarks, but promise to avoid the costly and perhaps catastrophic consequences of errantly shaped rewards, subjectively biased by shallow human understanding and desire. The direction current testbeds are taking in regards to complexity and realism inspired an interesting new approach. This paper explores whether this complexity and realism found in current RTS testbeds could be leveraged as objective rewards. The RTS game Command & Conquer Tiberian Sun was chosen as a testbed for a proof of concept. An approach was designed to capture the complexity typical of an RTS game. Resources must be extracted, invested into diverse structures and units, and defended from loss due to adversariality from an opponent in these typical RTS games. A complexity measure was designed that would capture the complexity of the economy required to win under these natural realistic constraints. It captures the increasing diversity of units and structures required in the expanding economy associated with winning against an opponent. The complexity measure makes use of a ResNet variational autoencoder. This ResNet VAE attempts to maximize both for reconstruction accuracy and compression of images of the testbed. This measure was termed visual complexity. It compresses visual information of the in-game economy while retaining reconstruction accuracy. It thereby retains only important information required for reconstructing the structures and units in the game. The entropy of the information it determines must be retained to reconstruct images of the in-game economy is a measure of the diversity of the higher level patterns such as structures and units. This provides a measure of the complexity of the in-game economy. A custom testbed was made to demonstrate this method in action and provide a proof of concept with preliminary results. The testbed, called the Tiberian Sun Grid World, simulates the acquisition of resources and terrain after successful battles and the expansion of an economy of diverse units and structures. It similarly simulates an economy that shrinks and recedes across the terrain with defeats in battle. Battles are simulated with values from an open source version of Tiberian Sun, according to the calculations described in the paper. The preliminary results from this proof of concept demonstrate that visual complexity can provide a useful form of frequent reward from game images. It performs well against the use of a mere survival signal, the sole use of the reward given for surviving to the end of an episode of learning. We see the gap between their performances widen as the length of an episode increases. The number of battles in an episode is increased from 10 to 20 to 40 before a survival reward is provided at the end of an episode. We see visual complexity continually outperform the sole use of survival signal. It tracks well with an ideal potential function describing the count of successful battles. This measure of visual complexity increasingly outperforms the use of mere visual entropy being the entropy of the basic pixel values in an image. The compression and modeling of the structures and units in the game by the ResNet VAE provides a superior measure of the true diversity of economic assets in the game, rather than just the entropy of the basic pixel values themselves. The MDP underlying the Tiberian Sun grid world was swapped out to check for any particular bias coming from the Tiberian Sun unit values in the battle simulation. The simple MDP of Carpol V0 was used to replace the battle simulation MDP underlying the testbed. Instead of successive battles corresponding to an expanding economy, time upright in Carpol would correspond with economic expansion. Visual complexity based on the ResNet VAE applied to this economic expansion continued to provide a reward similar to an ideal potential function. As episodes of learning were made longer, visual complexity also showed an increase in performance increase over mere survival signal, a reward that had been withheld from the agent learning Carpol until the end of an episode of learning. Visual entropy strangely outperformed both survival signal as well as visual complexity, but its outperformance against even an ideal potential function suggests the noise inherent in it was helping exploration in the simpler MDP of Carpol. It failed to help exploration in the more complex MDP of Tiberian Sun unit battles, as we saw previously. So, onto criticisms. Of course, these are preliminary results and are limited and provide merely a proof of concept of the use of visual complexity in certain domains. They are limited to scenarios where an expansion of diverse structures is associated in some way with optimal behavioral policy. This limited type of visual complexity shown in the paper can then be considered to be merely the maximization of structural complexity. While this is useful to current RTS testbeds and perhaps city-building games, in reality it is really only at the larger economic level the use of this type of reward would help find optimal behavioral policy for an agent. As to competitor methods, complexity in some form has already been proposed several times for AI. Alternatives tend to focus on behavioral complexity rather than the structural complexity this paper proposes. Novelty search in evolutionary computing searches for behavioral complexity, but is limited by the need for a subjective behavioral characteristic to be specified. DIAN, which stands for Diversity is All You Need, an algorithm for reinforcement learning, provides an objective information theoretic basis for the maximization of behavioral complexity. It avoids the subjective choices required with novelty search, but it is based on agent empowerment and is therefore constrained to learning a skill set from the action space of the agent. It is argued by the authors that both these approaches fall short in fulfilling all the criteria outlined for an objective form of reward shaping. Novelty search has a requirement for a subjectively chosen behavioral characteristic. DIAN has an objective information theoretic basis for generating reward, but is constrained to the self-centered motivations of agent empowerment, and theoretically constrained to only ever learn from the action space. It theoretically would not take into account the visual complexity of the economy, ecology, and other agents around it. Both would seem to fall short in offering even a theoretical path to avoiding the strawberry picker nightmare scenario, the scenario of an errant AGI led astray by subjectively chosen reward functions or by self-centered shallow motivations. While the visual complexity measure proposed in this paper is currently limited to the structural complexity of visuals, it is thought to at least offer a theoretical route to avoiding the strawberry picker scenario. While currently existing as a proof of concept with preliminary results from a custom testbed scenario, with further future work, it promises a path to a form of objective reward that respects the complexity of the economy, ecology, other agents, and living systems in general. It does this not through further handcrafted rules imposed top-down, but merely by following similarly in the footsteps of living systems, operating under natural constraints. It rewards itself for increasing the complexity and diversity of physical material structures in reality. While this currently is only useful on some macroeconomic or ecological level, useful only to RTS or city building games. With the successful widening of this method to take into account behavioral complexity, it will hopefully provide more than theoretical promise to objectively shaped reward. It may offer a tentative pathway for objectively shaped rewards. Thank you for listening. I hope to see you all at the QA. The first QA is Monday, May 9th, 10:30 London time. There's a link to the Google meeting there. And the second QA will be Tuesday, May 10th, 4:45 p.m. London time. And there's also a link to the Google meeting there. Thank you for listening.